All right, so today we're diving deep into the world of jet fuel oil.
Jet fuel
Yeah,
oil.
and it's not just like some small little corner of the market.
Right.
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
Globally, it was worth over $11 billion in 2024.
Big.
But get this.
Yeah.
It's projected to triple
Triple.
to nearly $35 billion
Wow.
by 2032.
Okay.
That's like a 15% annual growth rate.
Yeah, that's serious growth.
So it's worth wrapping our heads around what's driving this and who the big players are in this whole thing.
For sure. When most people think about jet fuel, they think about, commercial airlines.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
We're talking military aircraft,
Yeah.
private jets, all sorts of aviation, really.
Yeah. It's the lifeblood.
It is. It's essential.
And what's really interesting is this boom that we're talking about.
Right.
It's not just coming from one place.
Yeah.
It's like a whole bunch of factors coming together.
A perfect storm almost.
Yeah, you've got more and more people flying. Airlines are buying more planes, expanding their fleets.
Got to keep up.
And then you've got this huge push for fuels that are more energy efficient.
Yeah, the sustainability aspect is huge these days.
Right.
It's not just about growth. It's about responsible growth.
Exactly. And it's not just about the planes themselves, right?
No.
Think about how much the world has changed.
Oh, absolutely.
People have more money now.
More disposable income.
Yeah, so more people can afford to fly.
Uh-huh.
And then low-cost carriers have made it even more accessible.
Right. It's not just for the elite anymore.
And in emerging markets, you're seeing better connectivity.
Opening up whole new routes and destinations.
It's like all these trends are all coming together at the same time.
It's fascinating to watch it unfold.
But there's another big shift happening too, right?
Oh, yeah. A really important one.
This move towards cleaner energy.
Sustainability. That's the key word.
So where does that fit into all of this?
Well, sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF.
Yeah.
It's not just some futuristic idea anymore.
Right.
It's becoming a real game changer.
Uh-huh.
And alongside that, you have all these technologies aimed at making things more energy efficient.
Yeah.
So you have environmental regulations that are getting stricter,
Uh-huh.
and then this global push to be carbon neutral.
Yeah.
That's putting real pressure on the industry to adapt and change quickly.
So basically they have to evolve or get left behind.
Exactly. It's a survival of the fittest situation.
Okay, so our mission today, we're going to cut through all the noise and figure out who the top companies making jet fuel oil actually are.
Sounds good.
But we're not just going to list names.
No.
We want to understand what makes them the leaders.
Right. What sets them apart?
What are the things that we should be looking at to evaluate these companies?
Uh-huh.
And who are the up-and-comers who are trying to shake things up?
The disruptors?
Yeah, the ones trying to take on the giants.
Right.
Luckily, we've got some great sources that give us a really interesting look at the whole landscape.
I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, me too.
Right off the bat, it's interesting to see this mix of the big energy companies that we all know,
Yeah.
along with some companies that you might not immediately think of when you think about jet fuel.
Interesting.
So the article we're looking at, it highlights the big five.
Okay.
Exxon Mobil,
Huh?
BP,
Yeah.
Shell,
Of course.
Chevron,
Right.
and Total Energies.
Yeah. Those are the names that people probably think of first.
They're the heavy hitters.
Right. But our source also points to a whole bunch of other players.
Yeah, it's a much bigger playing field.
You've got Gazprom, Neft,
Oh.
Indian Oil Corporation,
Right.
Farad Petroleum, Honeywell,
Interesting.
Qatar Jet Fuel Company,
Okay.
Nest World Fuel Services, Rosneft, Deutschland Sinopec, and Oman Oil Company.
Wow, that's quite a list.
So it's way more diverse than you might think at first.
It really is. So to understand who's who in this whole thing,
Yeah.
we need to look at what makes them stand out.
Right.
So how do we measure these companies?
Right. What are the yardsticks?
The article lays out some key criteria.
Okay. Sure.
First, and maybe the most obvious, revenue and market share.
Right.
This basically tells you how much money they're making
Mm.
and what percentage of the market they control.
Mm-hmm.
So strong revenue usually means that their products are in high demand.
Yeah. People want what they're selling.
Exactly. And they have solid customer base.
Okay. So it's about who's selling the most fuel.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
But what else are we looking at?
Another really important thing is their product portfolio.
Okay.
It's not just about that traditional kerosene-based jet fuel anymore.
So what else is there?
Well, we need to look at their sustainable aviation fuels,
Uh-huh.
those bio-based alternatives that we talked about.
Right.
And then within that, you have to look at the specifics.
Okay.
How energy efficient are they?
Right.
What kind of emissions reductions do they offer?
Uh-huh.
And this is a big one.
Yeah.
Do they meet all those environmental regulations?
Right. Because those are getting stricter and stricter.
So this really shows you who's keeping up with the times.
Right, adapting to the changing landscape.
Exactly.
So when we talk about bio-based,
Yeah.
we're talking about fuels that are made from plants or other organic materials.
Right. So it's a more renewable source.
So it's not just about how much fuel they produce.
Yeah.
It's also about what's in it and how it impacts the environment.
Exactly. It's a bigger picture now.
Okay. What else is important when we're evaluating these companies?
Technological innovation is huge.
Innovation.
Who's coming up with new and more efficient ways to make jet fuel?
Okay.
Who's developing those cleaner burning fuels? And who's investing in things like SAF production or carbon capture?
Right. So these are the companies that are shaping the future of the industry.
The ones pushing the boundaries.
And that feels particularly important when you're talking about an industry that needs to get greener.
Yeah, they're under pressure to decarbonize.
Okay, so we've got revenue, we've got product portfolio, we've got innovation. What about their reach?
Global presence. That's another big differentiator.
Global presence.
Yeah, how well can these companies get their fuel to airports all over the world?
Makes sense.
Do they have strong networks in places like North America and Europe?
The big markets.
But also in those rapidly growing areas like Asia Pacific and the Middle East.
Yeah, because those are the markets of the future.
Exactly. So having that global footprint means you can offer a more reliable supply.
Right, and you can tap into different markets.
You're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
It makes sense. You can't really be a leader if you're only operating in a few places.
It limits your potential.
And I'm guessing all this innovation, all this global infrastructure, it takes a lot of money.
It does. Investment is key.
So how do we measure that?
Well, we look at their investment in research and development, or R&D.
R&D.
Yeah. This is how we can tell if a company's serious about staying ahead of the curve.
So the ones putting money into finding better, cleaner ways to power planes.
Those are the ones to watch.
Okay, so we've got revenue, product, portfolio innovation, global presence, R&D.
We're almost there.
What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The last thing we look at is their partnerships and collaborations.
Okay.
Who are they working with? Are they teaming up with airlines, airport authorities,
Right.
companies that specialize in sustainable technologies,
Okay.
maybe even government agencies?
Interesting.
These collaborations can be really important.
Yeah.
They can help speed up the development of new fuels and give companies a wider reach.
So it's about working together to achieve common goals.
Exactly. Strength in numbers.
Okay, so those are the lenses that we're going to be using today.
Let's go.
Let's start with the biggest one.
Okay.
Exxon Mobil.
All right. Exxon Mobil.
What do our sources tell us about them?
Well, they're definitely a major player.
Yeah.
In 2023, their total revenue was a massive $413.7 billion.
Wow.
And almost $10 billion of that came from jet fuel oil.
That's a lot.
It gives them about an 8.5% market share.
So they're controlling a pretty big chunk of the market.
Their strength really comes down to their size. They've got a truly global reach, a wide range of products, and huge refining capacity.
So they've got the infrastructure to back it up.
Exactly. And their supply chain is super efficient.
But I imagine that kind of size can also be a challenge.
It can make it harder to change direction quickly.
Yeah, to adapt.
Especially when what you're doing is already so profitable.
It's like trying to turn a giant ship.
Exactly. It takes time and effort.
So what about their sustainability efforts?
Well, they are making some moves in the SAF space.
Okay.
They're looking at things like agricultural waste and algae as feedstocks to make their fuel.
So using those to lower carbon emissions.
Right. And the article mentions a big collaboration they have to supply over 500 million gallons of SAF to a major airline.
That's a serious commitment.
It is. They're also working on ultra-low sulfur jet fuel to meet those stricter environmental standards, and they're investing in R&D to try and make SAF cheaper to produce and reduce its carbon footprint.
So they're working on multiple fronts.
It seems like it.
Okay, let's move on to BP.
Our BP.
How do they stack up?
Well, they've also got a huge global operation.
Yeah.
And they've made it clear that they're committed to sustainability.
So it's part of their mission.
It seems to be. Their total revenue in 2023 was $241.4 billion.
Okay.
With $7.4 billion of that coming from jet fuel oil.
So a little less than Exxon Mobil?
Yeah, they have about a 6.5% market share.
Still a big chunk.
Oh, yeah. They've got a really well-established network of refineries and distribution channels.
So they can get their fuel where it needs to go.
Exactly. They're known for their reliability.
And what about their sustainability initiatives?
They've got some interesting partnerships going on.
Okay.
One in particular is focused on developing SAF.
Uh-huh.
But the feedstock they're using is municipal solid waste.
Municipal solid waste.
Basically trash from households.
Wow, so they're turning trash into fuel.
That's the idea. And it could potentially cut emissions by up to 80%.
That's incredible if it works.
It's a promising technology for sure. They're also investing in things like renewable energy and carbon capture.
Okay, so they're looking beyond just jet fuel.
Yeah, they're diversifying.
Makes sense. What about their jet fuel itself?
Well, their Jet A1 fuel is used pretty widely.
Uh-huh.
And they've committed to producing over 500,000 metric tons of SAF every year by 2025.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
It seems that way.
Okay. Let's talk about Shell now.
All right. Shell, another big name.
Yeah, one of the giants.
Their total revenue in 2023 was $360.8 billion.
Wow.
With $8.7 billion from jet fuel oil.
So right in between Exxon Mobil and BP?
Yeah, they've got about a 7.5% market share.
Okay.
They're seen as a global leader, known for coming up with new solutions.
Right.
And their supply chain is really impressive.
How so?
They reach over 800 airports around the world.
That's incredible.
That's a lot of airports.
What are they doing on the sustainability front?
Well, they're using things like used cooking oil and agricultural residues to make their SAF.
Interesting. So again, using waste products.
Exactly, giving them a second life.
And our article mentions a partnership they have to supply SAF for over 1,000 flights.
Yeah, a big project.
And they're saying that will cut CO2 emissions by 60%.
That's significant.
It is. What else are they doing?
They're also working on fuel additives.
Fuel additives?
Yeah, these are designed to make engines more efficient.
Okay.
And reduce the amount of maintenance that airlines have to do.
So they're trying to squeeze more out of the existing technology?
Exactly, making it go further.
All right, next up we've got Chevron.
Okay, Chevron.
A familiar name.
They reported a total revenue of $246.3 billion in 2023.
Okay.
And $6.9 billion of that was from jet fuel oil.
So they're a bit smaller than the others we've talked about.
Yeah, they have about a 6% market share.
Okay.
Their strengths are in their refining capabilities and their commitment to sustainability.
Which they've made very clear.
They have, and they have a really extensive network of operations.
So they've got the infrastructure to support their goals.
Exactly.
What are some of the specific things they're doing in terms of sustainable fuel?
Well, they're using things like algae and agricultural waste to make theirs safe.
So similar to some of the others we've talked about.
Yeah, they're all exploring those kinds of options.
And they're claiming that PREA can reduce emissions by up to 70%.
That's a big reduction.
It is, but here's a big one.
Yeah.
They've invested $1 billion.
$1 billion.
In a renewable fuel refinery.
Wow, that's a statement.
It is. It shows they're serious about this.
They're putting their money where their mouth is.
What about their traditional jet fuel?
Their Jet A1 fuel is also widely used. And they're actively involved in partnerships and investments in the broader renewable energy sector.
So they're not limiting themselves to just jet fuel?
They're thinking about the bigger picture.
Okay, finally, let's talk about Total Energies.
Total Energies.
The last of the big five.
They reported a total revenue of $268.8 billion in 2023.
Okay.
With $7.1 billion coming from jet fuel oil.
So similar to BP.
Yeah, they hold about a 6.3% market share.
Okay.
They see themselves as a leader with a strong focus on innovation and sustainability.
Those seem to be the key themes for all of these companies.
They are essential in today's market.
And they've got a robust global network.
Reaching over 700 airports.
Okay, so what's their approach to sustainable aviation fuel?
They're investing heavily in SAF development. Looking at advanced biofuels and even synthetic fuels.
Synthetic fuel.
Yeah, these are made using renewable energy sources.
Interesting.
They've got a partnership to supply over 300 million liters of SAF.
Okay.
Which they say will cut life cycle emissions by 70%.
That's a big claim.
It is. I mean, they're also working on things like fuel management systems.
Fuel management systems.
Yeah, these help airlines use their fuel more efficiently.
So trying to reduce waste.
Exactly. Optimize everything.
So it seems like all of these big players, they're all starting to recognize the need to adapt.
The writing's on the wall.
And they're all making moves in the sustainable aviation fuel space.
To varying degrees.
Right. Some are more committed than others.
It seems that way.
But as we mentioned earlier, there are other companies out there who are trying to challenge these big guys.
The up-and-comers.
Yeah, the ones looking to disrupt the industry.
The challengers.
Exactly. And our article highlights a few of them.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Indian Oil Corporation.
Right.
Farhat Petroleum Corp. LTD.
Oh.
Honeywell International Inc.
Interesting.
Qatar Jet Fuel Company. And Neste Oil.
So a mix of familiar and less familiar names.
Exactly.
I'm curious to see how they're positioning themselves.
Let's start with Indian Oil Corporation and Bharat Petroleum.
Okay, Indian Oil and Bharat Petroleum.
These two are based in India,
right,
and they're really taking advantage of their refining capabilities.
Makes sense.
And their distribution networks in the Indian aviation market.
Right, they've got a strong foothold there.
And that market is growing rapidly.
It's a key region.
And both of these companies are investing in biofuel production and SAF initiatives.
So they're aligning themselves with the global sustainability push.
Exactly. They're getting ahead of the curve.
Bharat Petroleum is also focusing on becoming more efficient.
Okay.
And offering competitive pricing.
So they're trying to make themselves as attractive as possible.
Especially in the South Asian region.
Makes sense to focus on your home turf.
It's a smart strategy.
Okay, what about Qatar Jet Fuel Company?
QJet.
QJet, right?
They've got a really interesting advantage.
What's that?
Their location.
Okay.
They're in the Middle East.
Right.
Which, as you know, is a major global aviation hub.
And it's only getting bigger.
Exactly. So they're right in the heart of it all.
Plus, they've got strong partnerships with those big Gulf airlines.
Yeah, like Emirates and Qatar Airways.
Right, so they've got a built-in customer base.
They're in a prime position.
All right. Neste Oil.
Neste.
They seem to be all in on sustainable fuels.
Yeah, they're really making a name for themselves in that area.
What makes them stand out?
Well, they're based in Finland.
Yeah.
And they're one of the leading producers of SAF. But here's the interesting part.
Yeah.
They mostly use waste materials as their feedstocks.
Waste materials like what?
Things like animal fats and used cooking oil.
So stuff that would otherwise just be thrown away.
Exactly. They're giving it a new purpose.
And that's very appealing from a sustainability perspective.
It's a circular economy approach.
And they're not stopping there?
No, they're not.
They've got plans to significantly ramp up their SAF production.
They want to be a key supplier for airlines that are trying to reduce their emissions.
So they're really betting on the future of SAF.
They see it as the way forward.
Okay, finally, let's talk about Honeywell International Inc.
Honeywell.
They're involved in a lot of different technology areas.
They're a big player.
So what are they bringing to the jet fuel market?
Well, they have this process called the UOP eco-fining process.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a really important technology for making renewable fuels.
So they're not just producing fuel, they're providing the technology to make it.
Exactly. They're more of a technology provider.
And they have a lot of experience in aerospace technologies.
Yeah, they've been in that space for a long time.
And they're also developing digital tools to help optimize fuel supply chains.
So they're taking a more holistic approach.
It's not just about the fuel itself.
No, it's about the whole system.
So these emerging players, they're all coming at the market from different angles.
Different strategies.
You've got regional dominance, strategic location, specialized technologies, and broader solutions.
They're all trying to carve out their niche.
And it sounds like they could really shake things up.
They have the potential to be disruptive.
Now, our source also talks about some general strategies that new companies can use to really succeed in this market.
I'm all ears.
What are some of the key things they need to do?
Well, the article emphasizes that they need to focus on developing those advanced fuel technologies, but they also need to be cost competitive.
Right, because cost is always a factor.
Especially when you're going up against those big companies.
Yeah, they have economies of scale.
Exactly. So new companies need to be smart about it.
And given the focus on sustainability, they need to prioritize those solutions that offer big reductions in carbon emissions.
So things like SAF from waste materials and algae-based oils.
Right, because that's what the industry is demanding.
Which is what the world is demanding.
And they can't forget about efficiency.
No, they need to constantly be looking for ways to improve their refining technologies.
Right, to optimize production and keep costs down.
It's a constant race.
So basically, they need to be greener and more efficient.
That's the winning formula.
But what about the more practical aspects of getting into the market?
Well, they need to have smart strategies for sourcing their feedstocks.
Makes sense.
And they need to leverage economies of scale.
Right. The more they produce, the cheaper it gets.
Exactly.
And where should they focus their efforts?
The article suggests targeting those high-growth regions.
Okay.
Places like North America, Europe, and Asia-Pacific.
Right, because that's where the demand is.
And that's also where the regulations are pushing for sustainable fuels.
So they're hitting the market where it matters most.
Exactly, making the biggest impact.
Then what about those partnerships?
They're crucial.
They are.
Building relationships with airlines, fuel distributors, government organizations.
Okay.
It can really help new companies get a foothold in the market.
It's about bidding trust and credibility.
Exactly. Showing that you're a serious player.
And finally, they need to be aligned with those global sustainability goals.
That's non-negotiable these days.
Using eco-friendly production methods, focusing on lower carbon alternatives.
It's not just good for the planet. It's
right.
good for business.
It attracts customers who care about the environment, and it could lead to better regulations or incentives.
Governments want to support companies that are doing the right thing.
So for new companies that want to make a real impact, it's a combination of factors.
It's a multi-pronged approach.
They need technological innovation, a focus on clean and affordable fuels.
Right.
They need to target the right markets, build strong partnerships, and they absolutely have to be committed to sustainability.
It's the foundation for success.
Okay, so let's sum it all up. What are the key takeaways from our deep dive today?
Well, it's clear that the jet fuel market is growing. Driven by more air travel and the need for more efficient fuels.
Right.
But at the same time, we're seeing this huge shift towards sustainability because of regulations and global targets for carbon neutrality.
So the industry is being pulled in two directions.
It's a balancing act.
And the big players like Exxon Mobil, BP, Shell, Chevron, and Total Energies, they're still on top.
Yeah.
Because of their infrastructure and their investments in R&D. But they're facing competition from these more agile companies.
The disruptors.
Right. Companies like Indian Oil, Bharat, Petroleum Nest, and Honeywell.
They're coming in strong.
They're focusing on specific areas like biofuels, alternative fuels, and new technologies.
They're finding their niche.
And it feels like the market is becoming more dynamic.
It's definitely evolving.
With the big players still leading the way.
But with these smaller companies nipping at their heels.
So in the end, it's the companies that can balance innovation, efficiency, and sustainability.
Those are the ones that will thrive.
They have to find that sweet spot.
Exactly. It's not just about producing fuel anymore.
Right.
It's about producing it in a way that meets the needs of the industry and the needs of the planet.
So it's a much more complex equation now.
It is. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
I've learned a lot.
Me too. And it leaves me with a question.
Okay.
Given everything we've talked about, all these advancements in NES, the pressure to decarbonize, how do you think the big jet fuel companies are going to have to adapt?
That's a big question.
It is. What are they going to have to do to stay on top?
I think they're going to have to rethink their whole approach.
Yeah?
It's not just about incremental changes anymore.
Right.
They need to be bolder.
Maybe even disrupt themselves.
Exactly. They need to be the disruptors, not the disrupted.
What kind of collaborations are we going to see?
I think we'll see more partnerships with companies outside the traditional energy sector.
Interesting.
Tech companies, waste management companies.
Okay.
Even agricultural companies.
It's about thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. And what about investments?
Yeah. Where should they be putting their money?
Well, I think SAF is a no-brainer.
Right.
But they also need to invest in those next-generation technologies.
Like what?
Things like carbon capture and storage, direct air capture, even hydrogen-powered aircraft.
So they need to be looking long-term.
Yeah, they need to be thinking 10, 20 years ahead.
It's about betting on the future of aviation.
And the future of the planet.
It's a delicate balance.
It is between the old and the new.
Between the established and the disruptive.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.